Lindsay Harper adjusted her dress in the mirror in the lobby of a country club in Naperville, a suburb of Chicago. It was early October 2020, and the air already smelled of autumn leaves. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her red dress hugged her figure. She worked as a marketer at an agency promoting local brands, and events like these were a regular part of her life, a great way to network and get exposure. Tonight's fundraiser promised to bring together half of Illinois' business community, and Lindsay was determined to take advantage of every opportunity. "Lindsay, you look like you're straight out of a magazine," exclaimed Sophia, her friend and colleague, appearing next to her with a glass of white wine. Sophia, a short brunette with a bright smile, worked as a designer at the same agency. Her green dress sparkled under the chandeliers. "Thank you, Sophie. You're not bad either," Lindsay said, looking around the room. People in tuxedos and evening gowns moved between tables of refreshments, and a string quartet played something unobtrusive. "Have you found anyone worth talking to yet?" "Just had a chat with the organizer, Margaret. She wants us to help with publicity for their next auction," Sophia said, sipping her wine. "But I'm not here to work. See that guy by the bar? Tall, in a blue suit. Looks like he's from some construction company." Lindsay glanced toward the bar. The guy Sophia was talking about looked to be in his mid-30s, with short hair and a light stubble. He was laughing at something the bartender said. "Not my type," Lindsay said with a shrug. "Too ordinary." "You and your standards," Sophia rolled her eyes. "Okay, I'll go get some more wine. Don't be bored." Lindsay remained at the mirror, checking her lipstick. She enjoyed being the center of attention, but she was able to hide it behind a professional smile. Her job required charisma, and Lindsay knew how to play to her strengths. She had already spotted a couple of potential clients, the owner of a coffee chain and a woman who represented a local food delivery startup. But the evening was still young, and she was in no hurry. "Excuse me, is this yours?" a voice said behind her. Lindsay turned around. A man in his 30s, with dark hair and a dark gray suit, was holding her small purse, which she had apparently left on the table nearby. "Oh yes, thank you," she said, taking the bag. "I'd completely forgotten about it." "It happens," he smiled. His eyes were warm and his smile was genuine, without a hint of the pomposity Lindsay often saw at such events. "I'm Ethan Walsh, by the way." "Lindsay Harper," she said, extending her hand. His handshake was firm but not intrusive. "Are you here for work or just for the good company?" "A little of this, a little of that," Ethan said, adjusting his tie. "I'm an engineer working for a construction company. We're sponsoring the evening, so I had to show up. What about you?" "Marketing," Lindsay replied. "I promote brands, make them look pretty. I'm here today to find a few new clients and maybe have a glass of champagne." "Sounds like a plan," Ethan said. "Want me to help with the champagne? The bartender seems to know his stuff." Lindsay nodded, and they headed toward the bar. Along the way, she noticed several people saying hello to Ethan, including an older man in a tuxedo who called him our best engineer. Ethan responded politely, but without enthusiasm, as if he was used to such compliments. "So, Ethan, tell me, what kind of engineer are you?" Lindsay asked as they stopped at the counter. "Build skyscrapers or something more modest?" "Bridges, mostly," he said, ordering 2 glasses of champagne. "Designing them so they won't collapse under trucks. Nothing glamorous, but I like it." "Bridges?" Lindsay raised an eyebrow. "That sounds responsible." "You could say that," he handed her the glass. "And marketing? It's probably all creativity and parties like this." "Not really," Lindsay laughed. "Half the time it's arguing with clients who want a bigger logo. But I love it when it all comes together and the campaign comes to life." They clinked glasses. Lindsay noticed that Ethan was looking at her carefully, but not intrusively. He didn't try to fill the silence with idle talk, which pleasantly surprised her. Most men at such parties either bragged or flirted nonstop. "Lindsay, are you there?" a voice said. It was Margaret, the event's organizer, a woman in her 50s with perfect hair. I want you to meet someone. He owns a chain of fitness centers, and they need to be rebranded. Of course I'm coming, Lindsay said, turning to Ethan. Sorry, duty calls. No problem, he replied. Maybe we'll see each other again. Maybe, she smiled and left with Margaret. Lindsay spent the next hour talking to potential clients. The owner of the gyms, Paul, was a loud man with a loud laugh who immediately began to talk about his plans to open 3 more gyms. Lindsay listened, took notes on her phone, and promised to send a proposal. Then there was a conversation with Jenna, a young entrepreneur whose organic food delivery startup was looking for an advertising strategy. Lindsay had a charming way with them, and both men left happy. When she finally paused to catch her breath, Sophia appeared next to her again. So, how's the hunt? She asked, holding a plate of canapés. 2 prospects, Lindsay replied, taking a shrimp from her plate. And you? Still following the guy in the blue suit? Not anymore, Sophia sighed. He started talking about cryptocurrency. I ran away, but I saw you chatting with that engineer. He was cute, by the way. Ethan? Lindsay shrugged. He's normal. He doesn't show off, which is a plus. Wow, that's almost a compliment, Sophia teased. Look, he's over there by the stage. There's an auction going on. Maybe you should come closer. Lindsay glanced toward the stage. Ethan stood with a group of colleagues, listening as the host announced the prizes: a trip to a winery, dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. She decided to approach. Have you decided to buy anything? She asked, standing next to Ethan. He turned around, clearly pleased to see her. I'm thinking about the painting that's on display now. My sister loves art, and her birthday is coming up. But I don't know anything about it. What would you choose? Lindsay looked at the canvas, an abstract painting of blue and yellow. I'd choose dinner, to be honest. You can hang a painting on the wall, but food is an experience. Makes sense, Ethan nodded. Maybe I'll up the ante on dinner then. Are you in? No, I'm here more for work, Lindsay said. But if I were, I'd choose the winery trip. Wine is always a good idea. I'll remember, Ethan said with a smile. As the auction continued, Lindsay noticed Ethan raise his hand to bid on the dinner. He won the $800 item, and the room applauded. Lindsay was surprised. He didn't seem like the type to spend that kind of money easily. Congratulations, she said. Now it's your turn to tell me how that dinner goes. Deal, Ethan replied, but only if you tell me how your next advertising campaign will go. Is that a challenge? Lindsay narrowed her eyes. More of a suggestion, he said, taking out his phone. Give me your number, and I'll let you know how it goes. Lindsay gave him the number, feeling a little nervous. Ethan wasn't like the guys she usually dealt with, too straightforward, no game. But something about him caught her attention. Lindsay, we need you, Margaret called, waving from across the room. Paul wants to discuss timing. Coming, Lindsay called, then turned to Ethan. See you later? I hope so, he said. Lindsay spent the rest of the evening negotiating. Paul was demanding, but agreed to meet in the office. Jenna asked her to prepare a presentation for the following week. By the time Lindsay finally made it out to the parking lot, it was after midnight. She got into her car, checked her phone, and saw a text from Ethan. Nice to meet you. Coffee this weekend? Well, why not? She murmured, smiling, and replied, Sounds good. Right tomorrow. The next day, Lindsay was sitting in the office, flipping through reports, when Sophia looked into her office. So, how was yesterday? She asked, sitting down on the edge of the table. 2 clients, 1 phone number, Lindsay replied, without looking up from the screen. The number? From that engineer? Sophia perked up. Tell me. Nothing special, Lindsay said. Just coffee. He's normal, he's not pushy, he's not bragging. We'll see. That's progress, Sophia laughed. Usually you just say not my type, and that's it. Lindsay just shrugged, but in her head she was already imagining how their meeting would go. Ethan wasn't the type she usually chose, But there was something intriguing about it. On Saturday, Lindsay met Ethan at a coffee shop in downtown Naperville. He arrived a little early, ordering a latte for himself and leaving a menu for her. The conversation flowed easily. Ethan told her about his work on the Fox River Bridge, and Lindsay shared a story about a client who wanted dinosaur ads for his pizza place. Really? Dinosaurs? Ethan laughed. What did you do? I convinced him it was better to go with the Italian theme, Lindsay said. But he still asked for at least one T-Rex in the corner of the logo. You did it, Ethan said. I probably would have just settled for the dinosaur. That's because you're an engineer, not a marketer, Lindsay winked. They spent 2 hours in the coffee shop, and Lindsay found herself feeling comfortable. Ethan wasn't trying to impress her, but his quiet confidence was attractive. As they said goodbye, he suggested they meet again, and Lindsay agreed. He definitely likes you, Sophia said when Lindsay told her about meeting for lunch on Monday. They were sitting in a cafe across from the office, eating sandwiches. Maybe, Lindsay replied. He's taking his time, and that's nice. Just don't ruin it, Sophia teased. He seems like a nice guy. Lindsay just smiled. She liked Ethan, but she wasn't ready to think about anything serious. For now, this was just fun, a new person, new conversations, and she was going to enjoy it without making things more complicated for herself. It was a hot summer in Naperville in 2021, and Lindsay Harper stood in front of a mirror in a white dress, adjusting her veil. Her wedding to Ethan Walsh was to be held at a local church, with the reception at the country club where they met. Lindsay, a 31-year-old marketer, looked like a picture postcard bride, her dark hair pulled back into an elegant updo, her makeup highlighting her cheekbones. She knew all eyes would be on her, and that was fine with her. Lindsay, you're a goddess, Sophia, her friend and bridesmaid, exclaimed as she burst into the room. Sophia was wearing a lavender dress and holding a bouquet of peonies. Ethan is going to fall over when he sees you. I hope he at least has time to say yes, Lindsay replied, smiling. She turned to the mirror, checking that everything was perfect. How are things outside? Are the guests here yet? The place is full, Sophia said, adjusting her earrings. Your mom's already crying, and Ethan's dad's trying to organize everyone like it's a construction project. Oh, and there's some guy with a guitar saying he wants to sing for you. I said it's not on the program. Well done, Lindsay laughed. The last thing we need is a drunk relative singing a love song. Carol, the wedding planner, a woman in her 40s with a clipboard in her hand, poked her head into the room. Lindsay, we're starting in 15 minutes. Everything's ready, but your brother wants to know if his kids can have some more cake before the ceremony. Seriously, Trevor? Lindsay rolled her eyes. Tell them they can have all the cake after the ceremony. Just sit quietly. Carol nodded and disappeared. Lindsay looked at Sophia. Remind me why I agreed to this wedding. Because Ethan is a golden man, and you know it, Sophia replied, adjusting Lindsay's veil. Plus, he bought that house you've been dreaming about. When are you moving in? In a month, Lindsay said. Ethan's already planning where his office will be, and I'm thinking about a new kitchen. You should see the windows, Sophie. Ethan closed on a house in Naperville a week before the wedding, a 2-story cottage with a large backyard in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. Lindsay was thrilled, though she joked that she would have to learn to cook to fit in with the house. Ethan, a bridge engineer, was practical and reliable, and Lindsay appreciated that. But deep down, she had no intention of changing her lifestyle. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Ethan looked happy in a black tuxedo as Lindsay walked down the aisle on her father's arm. The guests, about 100 people, including colleagues, friends, and relatives, applauded as they exchanged rings. Lindsay's mother, Elaine, wiped away tears, and Ethan's father, Richard, smiled proudly at his son. At a banquet at a country club, Lindsay and Ethan danced to a slow song as guests raised glasses. Lindsay noticed Sophia chatting with Ethan's brother, Nick, at the bar. Nick, 3 years Ethan's junior, was a lawyer who liked to tease his older brother. You look happy, Ethan said as they sat at the head table. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "It's been a good day, huh?" "The best," Lindsay replied, kissing his cheek. "But I can't wait to get home. These shoes are killing me." "Just wait a couple more hours," Ethan smiled. "Then I'll take you out of there myself." Lindsay nodded, but her gaze slid around the room. She spotted Ryan, a colleague from the marketing agency, at the entrance. He was with a girlfriend, but his gaze lingered on Lindsay a little too long. She quickly looked away, feeling a slight rush of adrenaline. Ryan, with his sharp mind and his habit of texting her at night, was her little secret. They had started texting a few months ago, and then had met up a few times after work. Lindsay didn't think it was serious, just fun. "Lindsay, let's go take a picture," called her cousin Melanie, a young mother of two who already had her phone at the ready. "Your mom wants a picture of you and Aunt Sarah." "I'm coming," Lindsay said, standing up. She glanced at Ethan. "Don't miss me." "I'll try," he replied, sipping his champagne. The photo shoot dragged on. Aunt Sarah, Lindsay's father's sister, insisted on taking pictures with every member of the family. As the photographer was setting everyone up, Lindsay noticed Ryan walk past, heading toward the bar. Their eyes met, and he nodded slightly as if to say, "We'll talk later." Lindsay suppressed a smile. After their wedding, Lindsay and Ethan honeymooned in Hawaii. They walked the beaches of Maui, dined at restaurants overlooking the ocean, and laughed as Ethan tried to learn to surf. Lindsay enjoyed herself, but within a week she began checking her phone, responding to Ryan's texts. He'd text her about work, about how much he missed their conversations. Lindsay's responses were short, but she felt a little excited each time. Back in Naperville, they moved into their new house. Ethan spent his evenings sorting through boxes and planning renovations, while Lindsay busied herself with decorating the living room. She ordered a new couch, hung some pictures, and even signed up for a cooking class to surprise Ethan. The neighbors, an older couple named Bob and Linda, dropped by to introduce themselves, bringing a homemade pie. "Welcome to the neighborhood," said Bob, a burly man with a gray mustache. "If you need anything, we're just across the street." "Thank you," Lindsay replied, accepting the pie. "We're still getting used to it, but we already love this place." "Your husband said he designs bridges?" Linda asked, adjusting her glasses. "My nephew is also an engineer. He works on the railroad."
"Yeah, Ethan's all about his work," Lindsay smiled. "And I'm in marketing, so we always argue at home about which is more important, bridges or advertising."
The neighbors laughed, and Lindsay invited them for tea, but they declined, citing work. When they left, Lindsay put the pie in the fridge and checked her phone. Ryan texted, "How's family life going?" "Getting bored," she replied. "Holding up so far. Meet me at the office." At work, Lindsay carried on as usual, holding meetings, preparing presentations, joking with colleagues. Ryan, who sat 2 desks away, was a sales manager and often dropped by to ostensibly discuss projects. Their meetings took place during lunch breaks, coffee at a cafe around the corner, or a walk in the park near the office. Lindsay knew it was risky, but she liked the feeling of being in control. "Aren't you afraid someone will notice?" Sophia asked one day as they were having lunch at the office. She was eating a salad and Lindsay was picking at her sushi. "Who would notice?" Lindsay replied with a shrug. "We're just coworkers, having coffee. Ethan's on a construction site. He wouldn't even think about it." "Well, you know what you're doing," Sophia said, but her tone was guarded. "It's just, he's such a nice guy. Ethan, I mean." "I know," Lindsay replied, looking away. "It's all under control, Sophie. Don't worry." But Lindsay wasn't content with Ryan. A few months after their wedding, she signed up for yoga at a local studio to keep in shape. There, she met Caleb, an instructor with long hair and a relaxed demeanor. He was the polar opposite of Ethan, a free spirit who loved to travel and make spontaneous decisions. After one class, he invited Lindsay to grab a smoothie at a nearby cafe. "You're new, but you're making progress," Caleb said, sitting across from her at the table. His green t-shirt was slightly wrinkled, but that only added to his charm. "Why did you start working out?" "I want to stay in shape," Lindsay replied, stirring her smoothie. "Plus, it's a good way to take my mind off work." "I see," Caleb nodded. "Marketing, huh? You told me. Must be a lot of stress." "Sometimes," Lindsay said. "What about you? Do you teach people how to breathe all the time?" "Not only that," he laughed. "I also travel when I can. Last summer I was in Costa Rica, living in a cabin by the ocean. You'd like it." Lindsay smiled. She liked the way Caleb talked about life, no plans, no strings attached. They began meeting after class, usually under the guise of discussing yoga. Lindsay would tell Ethan she was working late or taking extra classes. Sophia, knowing about Caleb, would sometimes cover for her, providing her alibi. "You're definitely playing with fire," Sophia said as they drank cocktails at a bar a couple of months later. "Ryan, now this yoga guy, Ethan doesn't suspect anything." "He's too busy with his bridges," Lindsay said, sipping her margarita. "And I'm careful. I've got it under control." "I hope so," Sophia said, but her eyes were serious. "Just remember that you have a ring on your finger now." Lindsay nodded, but Sophia's words didn't hurt. She loved Ethan in her own way. He was reliable, caring, always bringing her coffee in the morning and planning their future. But Lindsay didn't want to give up her freedom. Ryan and Caleb gave her something her marriage hadn't: the thrill, the attention, the feeling that she could still choose. At home, Lindsay played the role of the perfect wife. She cooked dinners when Ethan returned from the construction site, listened to his stories about his work, and even organized a barbecue for the neighbors. Bob and Linda, their elderly neighbors, were delighted with her hospitality. "You're doing great," Linda said, helping Lindsay clear away the plates after the barbecue. "Ethan's lucky to have you." "Thank you," Lindsay replied, smiling. "I'm trying." Ethan looked pleased as he sat with Bob in the backyard. He was talking about a new project, a bridge over the Dupage River, and Lindsay could see his spirit brighten when he talked about work. She felt a twinge of guilt, but quickly brushed it aside. Her life was perfect: a beautiful house, a loving husband, and her little secrets never hurt anyone. One evening, while Ethan was away meeting with contractors, Lindsay met Caleb at a bar near the yoga studio. They drank craft beer and Caleb talked about his trip to Mexico. "The sunsets are so beautiful there, Lindsay," he said, leaning closer. "You should go. Just drop everything and fly away." "Maybe someday," she answered, playing with the straw. "But I have a job, a home, a husband." "Well, it's not forever," Caleb said with a slight smile. "Life's too short to sit still." Lindsay laughed, but his words hurt her. She didn't want to think about the future, just the moment. When she got home, Ethan was already asleep. She lay down next to him, staring at the ceiling, and thought that she was still in control. Her double life was her choice, and she wasn't going to give it up. It was a warm spring in Naperville in 2023, and Lindsay Harper sat in the bathroom of her house, staring at a pregnancy test. Two lines were clearly visible on the plastic window. She was 33, and she knew it was bound to happen sooner or later. She and Ethan hadn't used much protection. But as she held the test, Lindsay felt her heart clench. She wasn't sure who the father was: her husband, Ethan, her coworker, Ryan, or her yoga instructor, Caleb. Lindsay took a deep breath, stuffed the test into her robe, and walked out of the bathroom, deciding she'd deal with it later. In the kitchen, Ethan was making coffee, humming some old rock. His dark hair was a little tousled, and his t-shirt smelled of fresh paint he'd painted the backyard fence the day before. Their house in Naperville, purchased 2 years ago, was their little world, and Ethan loved to tinker with the renovations. "Good morning," he said, noticing Lindsay. "Want an omelet? I've already broken the eggs." "Yeah, go ahead," she said, sitting down at the counter. Her voice was calm, but her mind was racing. She watched Ethan deftly wield the frying pan and tried to imagine how to break the news to him. He wanted kids. They'd talked about it before they got married. But Lindsay wasn't prepared for how her secret connections with Ryan and Caleb would now complicate things. "You're quiet today," Ethan noted, placing a plate of omelet in front of her. "Everything okay?" "Just didn't get enough sleep," Lindsay said, forcing a smile. "I ran late with the presentation yesterday. The client wants a new slogan by Monday." "These clients of yours," Ethan shook his head, sitting down opposite. "Maybe you should take a day off. We could go to the lake, take a walk." "That sounds good," Lindsay said, picking at her omelet. "But I promised Sophia I'd help her with her project. Maybe next week." "Deal," Ethan nodded, sipping his coffee. "Just don't burn out on the job, okay?" Lindsay nodded, feeling a little guilty. Ethan was like that, so thoughtful, always willing to work around her schedule. She knew he would be thrilled to hear about the baby, but the thought that it might not be his made her stomach churn. After breakfast, Lindsay drove to the office. The marketing agency where she worked was in downtown Naperville, in a modern building with large windows. She parked, fixed her hair in the rearview mirror, and walked into the office, which was already bustling with activity. Her coworker, Melissa, a receptionist with bright red hair, was on the phone, and an intern, Josh, was sorting papers on a nearby desk. "Lindsay, good morning," Melissa called, covering the phone with her hand. "Your client from the coffee shop called, wants to meet today. I made an appointment for 2 o'clock." "Thanks, Mel," Lindsay replied, heading to her desk. She turned on her laptop, but her mind was elsewhere. Ryan, the sales manager, was sitting a few desks away, typing on his computer. Their eyes met, and he smiled slightly. Lindsay quickly looked away, feeling her cheeks warm. She opened her email, but instead of emails, she started Googling how to determine a baby's father before birth. The sites offered DNA tests, but they all required samples from potential fathers, and Lindsay wasn't about to give away her secrets. She closed the tab as Sophia, her friend and designer, plopped down in the chair next to her. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," Sophia said, holding a cup of coffee. Her black hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. "What happened?" "Nothing, just a rough morning," Lindsay replied, looking away. "How's your project with that startup?" "That's awful," Sophia sighed. "They want the logo to be minimalist but loud." "Those aren't even words, Lindsay. What about you? Still fighting with the coffee shop?" "Yeah," Lindsay nodded. "We have a meeting today. Wish me luck." "Good luck," Sophia said, standing up. "Oh, by the way, the girls and I are going to a bar on Friday. Are you coming?" "I'll see how I feel," Lindsay replied. She needed to talk to Sophia alone, but not here where they could be overheard. At lunchtime, Lindsay and Sophia went to a cafe across the street. They ordered sandwiches and sat by the window, watching the people pass by. Lindsay twirled her napkin in her hands, gathering her courage. "Sophie, I have something to tell you," she began, lowering her voice. "Just promise me you won't tell anyone." "Of course," Sophia said, putting down her sandwich. "What happened?" "I'm pregnant," Lindsay blurted out. Her voice wavered, and she quickly added, "Ethan doesn't know, and I'm not sure it's his." Sophia froze, her eyes widening. "Wait, what? Are you serious? Like Ryan or that yoga guy?" "I don't know," Lindsay admitted, looking down at the table. "I've been careful, but not always. And now I'm panicking, Sophie. What should I do?" "Okay, breathe," Sophia said, leaning closer. "First of all, congratulations, I guess. Second, you need to find out who the father is. There are tests, right?" "Yeah, but they need samples from everyone," Lindsay said. "How am I going to explain to Ethan that I need his DNA? Or Ryan? Or Caleb? This is it, Sophie." "It's not over," Sophia said firmly. "You can just tell Ethan you're pregnant and not worry about anything else for now. He'll be happy, you know that." "What if the baby isn't his?" Lindsay whispered. "He'll start asking questions. I'm not ready." "Then pretend," Sophia shrugged. "You're a master at playing roles. Tell him you're delighted, and sort out the rest later. Lindsay nodded, but her hands were shaking. Sophia was right, she was good at hiding the truth. But the thought of her life falling apart wouldn't go away. "Thanks for listening," Lindsay said. "Just don't tell anyone, okay?" "The grave," Sophia promised, squeezing her hand. "But you must control yourself. Don't give yourself away." They finished their lunch and returned to the office. Lindsay had a meeting with the coffee shop owner, Mr. Ramirez, a short man with a thick mustache who wanted a new advertising campaign for his chain. "We need something youthful," he said, sitting across from Lindsay. "Instagram, TikToks, all that stuff. My daughter says we're behind the times." "We could start a series of short videos," Lindsay suggested, taking notes. "Show your baristas making coffee, add catchy music. I'll send you a plan tomorrow." "Great," Ramirez nodded. "Just don't do anything too fancy. I don't want it to look like we're trying." "Got it," Lindsay smiled. She was on autopilot, but no one noticed her professionalism. After the meeting, she spotted Ryan chatting with Josh at the coffee machine. He winked at her, and Lindsay felt her pulse quicken. She couldn't tell him about the pregnancy, he'd panic, or worse, start asking questions. Instead, she texted Caleb, "Time after yoga, need to talk." He responded almost immediately, "Sure, let's meet at the cafe by the studio." That evening, Lindsay went to yoga. The studio was small, with wooden floors and the scent of lavender. Caleb, wearing a loose t-shirt and shorts, led the class, adjusting the poses of the students. Lindsay tried to concentrate, but her thoughts were racing. After class, she and Caleb sat at a nearby cafe, ordering herbal tea. "You seem a little tense today," Caleb said, sipping his tea. "Work getting on your nerves?" "Not really," Lindsay said, fiddling with her spoon. "Just a lot of stuff. Family stuff." "I understand," he nodded. "If you want, we can go to nature on the weekend. It's easier to switch off there." "Maybe," Lindsay said, but her voice was unsure. She couldn't tell Caleb the truth, he was too careless to understand her situation. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about his plans to open his own studio. When Lindsay got home, Ethan was watching the news on the couch. She took a deep breath and sat down next to him. "Ethan, I have news," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm pregnant." His face lit up. He threw the remote down and hugged her. "Really? Lindsay, this is amazing. When did you find out?" "This morning," she answered, smiling. His excitement was infectious, and for a second Lindsay almost believed everything would be fine. "I took a test. 2 lines. We're going to be parents," Ethan said, still holding her. "We need to call my mom, and yours. They're going to be shocked." "Let's not tell anyone yet," Lindsay said quickly. "I want to go to the doctor first, make sure everything is okay." "Sure, whatever you say," Ethan nodded. "But I can already picture us buying a crib and a stroller. Oh, and we'll have to redo the guest room." Lindsay laughed, but her smile was forced. Ethan was so happy it almost broke her heart. She went to bed, snuggled up to him, but she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts swirled about Ryan and Caleb, about the test she would never pass, and the lie she would have to keep up. The next day, Lindsay made an appointment with her gynecologist. The doctor, Dr. Kim, a woman in her 50s with a warm smile, confirmed the pregnancy 6 weeks. "Everything looks good," Dr. Kim said, showing Lindsay the ultrasound results. "We'll start with vitamins, and I'll give you a list of tests. Bring your husband to the next appointment if you'd like." "Sure," Lindsay said, but she knew Ethan wouldn't call yet. She needed time to come up with a plan. At the office, she was her usual self, joking with Melissa and Josh, discussing a new project with Ryan. But every time he got too close, she looked away. Caleb texted her, asking to meet, but Lindsay was evasive. Sophia, noticing her tension, dragged her in for coffee. "How are you?" Sophia asked, stirring her latte. "After yesterday's conversation." "I'm panicking," Lindsay admitted. "Ethan is thrilled, and I don't know how this is possible." "Survive." You'll be fine, Sophia said. Just act like everything's okay. And maybe stop seeing those too, at least for a while. I'm already thinking about it, Lindsay replied. But deep down, she knew she wasn't ready to give up on Ryan and Caleb. It was a muggy June in Naperville in 2023, and Lindsay Harper sat at the kitchen table in her and Ethan's house, sipping iced tea. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and a loose t-shirt hid the slightest hint of her belly. She was 8 weeks pregnant. Her bridge engineer husband, Ethan, was at the stove, making pasta with pesto. Their suburban Chicago cottage smelled of garlic and basil, and the evening news wafted through the living room. It smells great, Lindsay said, scrolling through her phone. She was responding to a text from Sophia, her friend, asking how her last appointment with the doctor had gone. Lindsay tried to appear relaxed, but inside she was on edge. Being pregnant had made her secret liaisons with Ryan, a coworker, and Caleb, a yoga instructor, even riskier. She'd decided to cut back on their visits, but she hadn't stopped entirely. I try, Ethan said, tasting the sauce with a spoon. His dark hair was a little disheveled from the day's work, and his shirt was rolled up to his elbows. There was chaos on the job site today. The contractor messed up the plans again. Really? Lindsay put her phone down. How do you put up with this? I'm used to it, Ethan shrugged, putting the plates on the table. The main thing is that the bridge doesn't collapse. How's your day going? Does the coffee shop still want TikToks? Yeah, Lindsay nodded. Mr. Ramirez is now asking us to film their barista in the style of some TV series. I'm already racking my brains. Ethan laughed as he sat down across from her. They began eating, and the conversation turned to their weekend plans. Lindsay suggested inviting their neighbors, Bob and Linda, over for dinner, and Ethan wanted to go shopping for a new lawn mower. It was all so routine that Lindsay almost forgot about her worries. But then Ethan brought up something else. Listen, I was reading about pregnancy, he said, twirling spaghetti around his fork. There are these tests, prenatal, for DNA. They check the health of the baby, and, paternity. I think we should do that. Lindsay froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. She set it down on her plate, trying not to show her panic. What? A DNA test? What's that for? Well, to be precise, Ethan said, looking at her. They can detect problems with the genetics, and just. To make things clear, that's standard now, isn't it? I'm not doing a DNA test, Lindsay blurted, her voice sharper than she intended. Don't you trust me? Ethan frowned, clearly not expecting that reaction. Lindsay, this isn't about trust. This is about the baby's health. I just thought it was a good idea. No, it's about you doubting me, she snapped, pushing her plate away. If you think that I could be with someone, that's insulting, Ethan. Wait, I didn't say anything like that, he said, raising his hands. I just suggested a test. Why are you so worked up? Because it's not normal. Lindsay stood up, her cheeks burning. We're married, we're expecting a baby, and you suddenly want to check if it's my baby. It's not normal. Ethan looked at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Lindsay, calm down. I'm not accusing you of anything. I just read the article and thought it was helpful. Forget it if you don't like it. No, I won't forget, she said, crossing her arms. You can't just let something like that go and pretend it never happened. It's offensive. Okay, I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice quieter. I didn't mean to upset you. Let's just eat, okay? Lindsay sat up, her appetite gone. She picked at her pasta while Ethan ate in silence. The tension was thick in the air, and Lindsay knew she had overreacted. But the thought of a DNA test scared the crap out of her. It might reveal that the baby might not be Ethan's, but Ryan's or Caleb's. She had to keep her cool. After dinner, Ethan went into the living room to watch baseball, and Lindsay started washing dishes to keep her hands busy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Plans for tomorrow? We can meet at lunch. Lindsay deleted the message without responding. She needed to be more careful, especially now. The next day, Lindsay drove to the office. The marketing agency was buzzing. Melissa, the receptionist, was arguing with a delivery driver about a delivery, and Josh, the intern, was trying to fix a printer. Lindsay walked to her desk, trying not to look at Ryan, who was talking to a client on the phone. "Lindsay, are you okay?" Melissa asked, coming up with a folder. "You look like you haven't slept." "It's just a tough morning," Lindsay replied, opening her laptop. "What's up with the coffee shop?" "Ramirez sent over a new list of ideas," Melissa said, handing over the folder. "He wants us to advertise their new pumpkin latte. I told you to call back." "Great, thanks," Lindsay nodded. She was grateful for the work. It took her mind off the conversation they'd had the night before. At lunchtime, she met Sophia in a park near the office. They bought hot dogs from a street vendor, an older man named Carl, who knew them by name. "Lady, as usual?" Carl asked, holding out the hot dogs with mustard. "Yeah, Carl, you're spoiling us," Sophia smiled, paying for both of them. "How are you?" "It's hot, but livable," he replied, wiping his forehead. "And you, office workers, are you still running around?" "Non-stop," Lindsay laughed. They walked over to the bench and Lindsay began to tell her story. "Ethan suggested a DNA test yesterday," she said, lowering her voice. "Prenatal, for the baby. He said it was for health reasons, but I panicked." "Wow," Sophia stopped chewing. "And what did you say?" "I'm not doing a DNA test, that's what," Lindsay said. "I almost lost it. I accused him of not trusting me. Now he probably thinks I'm nuts." "Well, you did go too far," said Sophia. "But I understand why you were nervous." "What did he say next?" "He apologized, told me to forget," Lindsay said, taking a bite of her hot dog. "But I saw his face. He's suspicious now, Sophie. I know it." "Okay, breathe," said Sophia. "Maybe he was just thinking about his health. Men read these articles and start to panic. Don't get worked up." "Easy for you to say," Lindsay sighed. "If he starts digging, I'm lost. Ryan, Caleb, I can't explain it." "Then keep your distance from them," Sophia advised. "Focus on Ethan. Be the perfect wife, and he'll forget about this test." Lindsay nodded, but her doubts persisted. She returned to the office, where she met with Mr. Ramirez. He arrived in his usual sweater, despite the heat, and began showing her sketches for a new advertisement. "Here, my daughter drew this," he said, showing a sketch of a pumpkin with a smile. "Maybe you can use it in the video?" "That's an interesting idea," Lindsay replied, making notes. "We could do an animation, add a pumpkin as a mascot. I'll send you some ideas tomorrow." "That's great, Lindsay. You always know what's right," Ramirez said, pleased. "My daughter will be thrilled." After the meeting, Lindsay noticed Ryan approaching her desk. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, and he looked like he had just gotten off an important call. "Hey, you didn't answer yesterday," he said quietly. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just busy," Lindsay replied without looking at him. "Lots of work." "Got it," Ryan nodded. "If anything, I'm at the cafe at lunch tomorrow. Join me if you want." "I'll see," she said, and he left. Lindsay felt relieved she needed to keep him at a distance. In the evening, she went to the supermarket to buy some groceries. There, she ran into Linda, their neighbor, who was choosing apples in the fruit section. "Lindsay, dear," Linda exclaimed, adjusting her glasses. "How are you? Ethan said you were expecting a baby." "Yeah, we just found out." Lindsay smiled, putting the tomatoes in the basket. "We're still getting used to it." "Oh, that's so exciting," Linda said. "Bob and I have 2 kids, grown up. If you need anything, just call. I know all the shops with baby things." "Thank you, Linda," Lindsay replied. "I'll definitely ask." They chatted about the neighborhood and the new cafes, and Lindsay left feeling like her life still looked normal on the outside. But at home, as she was putting away groceries, Ethan walked into the kitchen. "You seem a little thoughtful today," he said, opening the refrigerator. "Still angry about yesterday?" "No, I'm fine," Lindsay replied, putting the milk on the shelf. I'm just tired. Work, you know. I understand, Ethan said, but his voice was cautious. If something's wrong, you'll tell me, right? Of course, Lindsay nodded, forcing a smile. But as he walked into his office, she felt her heart tighten. His gaze was different, not accusing, but attentive. She knew that her refusal to take the test had left a mark, and now she would have to be even more careful. Lindsay went to bed thinking about how to keep her secret. She decided not to see Ryan and Caleb for now, focusing on Ethan. But the thought of him asking questions was nagging at her. She needed to be in control, for her sake and for the sake of the baby, whoever the father was. It was a clear morning in Naperville on June 7th, 2023, and Ethan Walsh sat in his pickup truck in a construction site parking lot, holding his phone. His dark hair was pinched by a baseball cap, and he held a cup of coffee from a roadside diner. Ethan, a 32-year-old bridge engineer, usually started his day by reviewing blueprints, but today his mind was elsewhere. The conversation he had had with his wife, Lindsay, the previous day about a prenatal DNA test had left a bad taste in his mouth. Her abrupt refusal and accusations of distrust had hurt him, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Ethan took a sip of his coffee and dialed the number a coworker had given him a few months ago. Grayson Detective Agency, a male voice answered on the second ring. This is Paul Grayson. Hello, my name is Ethan Walsh, Ethan said, looking out the window at the workers hauling beams. I need to check on something. Personal. Can you talk? Sure, Grayson replied. His voice was calm, professional. What exactly do you want to check? Ethan hesitated, feeling awkward. It's about my wife, I think. Maybe she's hiding something. I want you to keep an eye on her. Find out where she goes, who she meets. Got it, Grayson said. This is standard work. Can you tell me more? What's bothering you? Ethan recounted the conversation about the DNA test, how Lindsay had gotten angry and accused him of not trusting him. She never reacted like that, he added, and I started noticing that she was staying late after work a lot. She said it was a client, but I wasn't sure. Okay, Grayson said. We'll need her name, photo, address, place of work, schedule, whatever you have. We can start surveillance tomorrow. It usually takes a week or two to get anything concrete. $50 an hour, plus expenses. Is that okay with you? Yeah, Ethan said. I'll email it to you today. It's confidential, right? Absolutely, Grayson assured. No one will know, including your wife. I'll call you back as soon as I have something to report. Ethan thanked her and hung up. He felt bad hiring a detective behind Lindsay's back felt like a betrayal, but her reaction yesterday had been too strange for him to just brush it off. Ethan started the car and drove to the lot, determined to act like he normally would at home. At home, Lindsay had already left for the office. She left a note on the kitchen table. Left early, meeting with a client. Back for dinner. Love. Ethan read it, put it in his pocket, and started getting ready for work. He noticed that Lindsay had been leaving more notes like this lately, and now it seemed suspicious to him. He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away, and left the house. The construction site, where a new bridge was being built over the Dupage River, was bustling. Ethan parked next to the trailer that housed his temporary office. His coworker, Matt, a stocky guy with a tattoo on his forearm, was already there, checking over blueprints. Hey, Walsh, you're late, Matt said, still poring over his papers. The contractor screwed up with the concrete again. We need to recalculate the load. Seriously? Ethan threw his bag on a chair. That's the third time this month. Where's Bill? In the warehouse, yelling at the supplier, Matt replied, grinning. Want some coffee? I just made some. I've already, Ethan said, sitting down at his laptop. He opened the project, but it was hard to concentrate. His thoughts kept returning to Lindsay, to her harsh words yesterday. He decided to pay closer attention, but he wouldn't question her for now. At lunchtime, Ethan stopped at a nearby diner where workers often ate lunch. There he ran into Rita, a waitress in her 50s who knew everyone on the site by name. "Ethan, how are you?" Rita asked, setting a burger and Coke in front of him. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her apron was stained with ketchup. "You seem kind of thoughtful today." "Just a job," Ethan replied, smiling. "The contractors mess things up again." "Oh, these contractors," Rita rolled her eyes. "My husband worked in construction too. He was always complaining." "How is your wife?" "She's probably already preparing the nursery." Ethan froze, but quickly pulled himself together. "Yeah, slowly," he said. "It's early, but she's already looking at the catalogs." "That's so sweet," Rita said, wiping down the counter. "Tell her I said hi, and come over with her sometime. I'll buy you some pie." "Thanks, Rita," Ethan nodded. He finished his burger, left a tip, and returned to the playground. Talking to Rita reminded him of how everyone around him was expecting their baby, and that only increased his anxiety. He had to know the truth. Meanwhile, Lindsay sat in her office in downtown Naperville, flipping through a presentation for a client. The marketing agency was buzzing. Melissa, the receptionist, was sorting through mail, and Josh, the intern, was trying to figure out how to use a new printer. Lindsay tried to focus, but her argument with Ethan the night before kept coming back to her. She knew she had reacted too emotionally, and now she was afraid he would become suspicious. "Lindsay, are you coming to lunch?" Sophia asked, peeking in. Her black hair was braided, and she was carrying a bag. "I want to go to that new taco place." "Not today," Lindsay replied, not looking up from the screen. "We have to finish this presentation. Ramirez wants to see it by this evening." "Okay, but you look like you need a break," Sophia said. "If anything, I'll bring you a burrito." "Thanks, Sophie," Lindsay smiled. After Sophie left, Lindsay checked her phone. Caleb had texted, "Yoga today, can't stay after." She'd texted back, "Can't work. Maybe tomorrow." She needed to keep her distance, but she didn't want to cut off the conversation entirely. Ryan, the sales manager, walked into the office with a folder in his hands. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, but he looked confident as always. "Hey, Lindsay, do you have a minute? We need to discuss the budget for the coffee shop." "Yes, sit down," Lindsay said, gesturing to a chair. She tried to sound professional, but his proximity still unsettled her. They discussed the numbers, but as Ryan turned to leave, he quietly added, "You seemed a bit out of sorts yesterday. Is everything okay?" "Just busy," Lindsay replied, looking away. "Lots of projects." "If anything happens, I'm here," Ryan said with a wink and left. Lindsay exhaled. She needed to be more careful, especially now that Ethan was asking questions. At home, Ethan returned before Lindsay. He cooked dinner, chicken and rice, and turned on the TV, but his mind was busy. When Lindsay walked in, carrying her laptop bag, he noticed that she looked tired. "Long day?" he asked, placing the plates on the table. "Yeah," Lindsay said, kicking off her shoes. "Ramirez changed his plans again. Had to redo half the presentation." "That's tough," Ethan said, but his voice was controlled. He watched her as she poured the water. "You're late again. Is this the same customer?" "Yeah," Lindsay nodded, sitting down. "He's demanding, but he pays well. How's your day going?" "Usually," Ethan replied, "checking the beams at the construction site. Gotta meet the inspector tomorrow." They ate, discussing small details, but Ethan was more attentive than usual. He noticed that Lindsay was checking her phone more often, and her answers about work sounded rehearsed. He said nothing, deciding to wait for Grayson's report. After dinner, Ethan went to the garage where he kept his tools. There he met Bob, a neighbor who came by to borrow a drill. "Ethan, how are you?" Bob asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. His gray beard glistened in the lamplight. "Linda says you're expecting a baby." "Yeah," Ethan smiled, handing over the drill. "We're still getting used to it, but yeah, we're waiting." "It's a big deal," Bob said. "Linda and I have two, you know. If anything happens, just call us." Linda's already saving up old baby stuff. Thanks, Bob, Ethan replied. I'll tell Lindsay. After Bob left, Ethan stayed in the garage, looking at the tool racks. He thought about Lindsay, her harsh words, the way she avoided talking about the test. He hoped he was wrong, but his gut told him otherwise. Ethan went back into the house, texted Grayson a photo of Lindsay, her schedule, and the office address, and then went to bed, determined to wait for answers. It was an overcast morning in Naperville on June 21st, 2023, and Ethan Walsh sat in his office at a construction site, staring at a file that Paul Grayson, a private investigator, had just handed him. Ethan, a 32-year-old bridge engineer, looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a slightly rumpled shirt. He had been on edge for the past 2 weeks, waiting for Grayson's report on Lindsay, his wife. Her abrupt refusal to take a prenatal DNA test and evasive answers about delays at work had heightened his suspicions. Now the evidence was in front of him, and Ethan felt his world crumbling. "This is everything we've got," Grayson said, sitting across from him. The detective, a man in his 40s with a short haircut and a plain gray suit, spoke matter-of-factly. "Photographs, notes, correspondence. I've emailed copies to you, but paper is safer." "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice quiet. He opened the folder, and the first thing he saw was a photo of Lindsay with Ryan, her coworker, at a cafe near her office. They were sitting close, Lindsay laughing, touching his arm. Ethan clenched his jaw, turned the page. The next pictures showed Lindsay with Caleb, the yoga instructor, outside the studio. They hugged before getting into her car. "Is this all from the last 2 weeks?" Ethan asked, not looking up from the photographs. "Yeah," Grayson nodded. "She met Ryan 3 times, Caleb twice. We also got screenshots of her correspondence, anonymously, through a contact in her office. There's some pretty explicit messages there." Ethan turned to the next page, a printout of text messages. Lindsay had written to Ryan, "Ethan working late at the construction site today. Can we meet?" To Caleb, "Are you free after yoga? Need a break." Ethan felt his stomach clench. He closed the folder without finishing. "Are you sure it's her?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. "I'm sure," Grayson replied. "We checked everything. Her car, her address, her phone number. This is your wife, Mr. Walsh." Ethan nodded, looking out the window at the cranes and workers. "What now? I mean, what do people do with it?" "It depends," Grayson said, straightening his tie. "Some people go to a lawyer, get a divorce. Others try to talk. I don't give advice, but I can recommend a lawyer if you need one." "Give me his contact information," Ethan said, "and thank you for your work." Grayson handed over the card and left. Ethan was left alone, holding the folder. He was shocked, but he decided not to give in to his emotions. Lindsay had lied to him, and now he knew the truth. He would put the folder in the safe, talk to his lawyer, and decide what to do. But first he had to get back to work. The Dupage River Bridge wasn't going to build itself. At the site, Ethan met Matt, his colleague, who was checking the rebar at the base of the support. "Walsh, where have you been?" Matt asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. His anchor tattoo glinted in the sun. "The inspector's here, wanting to discuss the schedule." "I'm coming now," Ethan replied, trying to sound normal. "What does he say?" "As usual, whining about deadlines," Matt said, grinning. "Let's go figure it out." Ethan nodded and followed Matt, but his mind was elsewhere. He was remembering Lindsay, the way she had smiled at their wedding, the way she had made him coffee in the morning, the way she had promised to be there for him. It all seemed like a lie now. He forced himself to focus on the conversation with the inspector, an older man named Frank, who was picky about every detail. "Your drawing for support number 3 doesn't match the report," Frank said, flipping through his clipboard. His glasses had slipped down to the tip of his nose. "We need to recalculate the load." "We already checked," Ethan replied, opening his laptop. "Here's the data. It all matches." Frank chuckled, but agreed after 10 minutes of arguing. Ethan was glad for the distraction, but as soon as the inspector left, thoughts of Lindsay returned. He decided not to tell her anything until he had spoken to his lawyer. At home, he would act as normal so as not to scare her off. Meanwhile, Lindsay was sitting in the marketing agency's office, reviewing sketches for the coffee shop's new campaign. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her 8-week pregnant belly wasn't yet visible under her loose blouse. She was trying to avoid Ryan and Caleb, but it wasn't easy. Ryan kept glancing at her from a few tables away, and Caleb was texting, asking to meet after yoga. "Lindsay, are you going to meet Ramirez?" Melissa, the receptionist, asked, coming over with a cup of tea. Her red hair was pulled back into a bun. "He's already in the conference room." "Yeah, right now," Lindsay replied, closing her laptop. "He wants to change something again." "Yeah, now he's asking for more orange in the design," Melissa said, rolling her eyes. "Good luck." Lindsay smiled and walked into the conference room where Mr. Ramirez, the owner of the coffee shop, was leafing through a magazine, his mustache twitching as he spoke. "Lindsay, I thought orange was our color," he said, pointing to the sketch. "It's warm, it draws people in. What do you think?" "We can try," Lindsay replied, taking notes. "I'll ask the designer to add orange to the logo and banners. I'll send you some ideas by tomorrow." "Great, you always understand," Ramirez said, pleased. "My daughter says oranges are trendy." Lindsay nodded, but her thoughts were on Ethan. He had been acting more reserved since their argument about the DNA test, and it worried her. She decided to be more careful at home so he wouldn't suspect her connections to Ryan and Caleb. After work, Lindsay stopped at a bookstore to buy a pregnancy guide. There she met Kate, a former classmate who was working as a cashier. "Lindsay, it's been ages," Kate exclaimed, her blonde hair bouncing as she scanned the book. "Is this for you? Are you pregnant?" "Yeah, I just found out," Lindsay smiled, putting the book in her bag. "I'm still getting used to it." "Congratulations," Kate said. "I have a son, he's 2. If anything happens, call me, I'll share some advice. Ethan is probably in 7th heaven." "Yes, he's delighted," Lindsay replied, feeling a slight twinge of guilt. "Thank you, Kate." They chatted about old acquaintances, and Lindsay left, promising to stop by again. At home, she found Ethan in the living room, leafing through a construction magazine. "Hi," she said, putting her bag on the table. "I bought a book about pregnancy. Do you want to look at it?" "Yeah, go ahead," Ethan said, but his voice was neutral. He picked up the book, flipped through a few pages, and handed it back. "Looks useful." "Are you okay?" Lindsay asked, sitting down next to him. "You look tired." "Long day," Ethan said with a shrug. The inspector was picky again. "How are you?" "Fine," Lindsay replied. "Ramirez wants orange everywhere. We'll have to redo the sketches." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were sharp. He noticed Lindsay fiddling with the strap of her bag, something she did when she was nervous. He decided not to say anything, but he made a mental note of it. Grayson's file was in the safe at the construction site, and Ethan knew he had to make a decision soon. After dinner, Lindsay went to take a shower, and Ethan went into the garage to check on his tools. There he ran into Bob, a neighbor who was returning a drill. "Ethan, thanks for the drill," Bob said, his gray beard glinting in the light. "Fixed everything. How are you and Lindsay? Getting ready for the baby?" "Little by little," Ethan replied, taking the drill. "There's still a lot of stuff to buy." "Oh, that's just the beginning," Bob laughed. "Linda's already looking for her old baby blankets. Let me know if you need anything." "Thank you, Bob," Ethan said. He walked back into the house, his resolve growing stronger. He loved Lindsay, but the truth was more important. Tomorrow he will call his lawyer to see how to move forward. But for now he would keep it all quiet, watching Lindsay and gathering his strength for the next step. Lying in bed, Lindsay checked her phone. Sophia texted, "How are things with Ethan? Did he ask about the test again?" Lindsay replied, "Not yet, but he's weird. Gotta be careful." She turned off her phone and closed her eyes, hoping her secret would stay safe. But deep down, she knew her time was running out. It was a warm evening in Naperville on June 22nd, 2023, and Ethan Walsh sat in the living room of their home, clutching a folder of evidence collected by Detective Paul Grayson. Ethan, a 32-year-old engineer, looked tense, his dark hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The photos of Lindsay with Ryan and Caleb, the text messages she'd sent him, all confirmed his worst fears. Lindsay, his wife, 8 weeks pregnant, was cheating on him, and tonight he'd confronted her. Lindsay walked into the house, tossing her bag onto the couch. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her loose blouse hid her belly. "Hi," she said, heading toward the kitchen. "Have you eaten? I can reheat the pizza." "Lindsay, we need to talk," Ethan said, his voice firm. He stood up, holding the folder. "Please sit down." Lindsay froze, her hand hovering over the refrigerator door. "What's wrong?" she asked, turning around. "You're acting weird." Ethan put the folder on the table and opened it. "These are the pictures. You and Ryan at the coffee shop. You and Caleb at the yoga studio. And your messages to them. I know everything." Lindsay paled, her eyes darting to the folder. "What is this? Were you following me?" "I hired a detective," Ethan said, looking her in the eye. "After you refused the DNA test. You screamed that I didn't trust you, but it looks like you were hiding this." "This is bullshit," Lindsay blurted, crossing her arms. "You hired some spy to snoop around in my life? This is paranoia. Ethan, you're ruining our marriage." "I'm ruining it." Ethan raised his voice, but quickly regained his composure. "Lindsay, this is proof. You were meeting these guys behind my back. I want a DNA test. Right now. To know if this is my baby." "I'm not doing a DNA test," Lindsay screamed, her cheeks turning red. "Do you seriously think I cheated on you? That's our baby, Ethan. How can you say that?" "Because I have this," Ethan said, gesturing to the folder. "Photos, messages. You texted Ryan that I was busy at work and met him. Same with Caleb. Stop lying." Lindsay opened her mouth, but then stopped. She walked over to the folder, looked at the photos, and threw them away. "That doesn't mean anything. Ryan and I are coworkers, and Caleb is just a friend. You got it all wrong." "Then take the test," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "If you're so sure the baby is mine, the test will prove it. Why are you afraid?" "I'm not scared," Lindsay snapped. "I just don't want you to treat me like a criminal. You don't trust me, and it's killing us." "Lindsay, I saw the messages where you arranged to meet," Ethan said, clenching his fists. "This is not friendship. This is cheating. I'm not backing down. We're going to do the test." "Fuck you, Ethan," Lindsay snapped, grabbing her bag. "I'm not discussing this." She started for the door, but stopped and turned around. "You ruined this, not me." "We'll do the test," Ethan repeated, not moving. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. If you refuse, I'll sue." Lindsay froze, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Are you threatening to sue me?" she whispered. "After everything we've been through." "I want the truth," Ethan said. "If the baby is mine, I'll stay. If not, we're done. Decide." Lindsay slammed the door and went into the bedroom. Ethan remained in the living room, looking at the scattered photographs. He felt pain, but also determination. He would not let Lindsay manipulate him. He would put the folder away and wait for her answer, but he already knew that the marriage was on the rocks. The next day, Lindsay drove to the office, trying to keep her composure. The marketing agency was buzzing. Melissa, the receptionist, was discussing a delivery with a delivery guy, and Josh, the intern, was trying to set up a projector. Lindsay sat down at her desk, but her mind was on the argument from the night before. She texted Sophia, "Ethan knows about Ryan and Caleb. Hired a detective. I want a DNA test." Sophia responded a minute later, "Wow, this is serious. What are you going to do?" Lindsay wrote, "I don't know. I refused the test, but he won't back down." She put her phone away as Melissa approached. Lindsay, Ramirez called, Melissa said, holding up her notepad. He wants to add a special on pumpkin spice lattes. Can you call him back? Yes, right now, Lindsay answered, opening her laptop. She called Mr. Ramirez, the owner of the coffee shop, who was in high spirits. Lindsay, I thought the latte special might attract students, he said, his mustache twitching. Maybe a discount for those who post a photo on social media. Good idea, Lindsay replied, writing it down. We can make a hashtag and post it on Instagram. I'll send you a plan by tonight. Well done, you're a good boy, Ramirez said. My daughter is already waiting to see the ad. Lindsay ended the call and went back to work, but her mind was on Ethan. She knew her refusal to take the test was suspicious, but she couldn't agree the test could ruin everything. She decided to talk to Sophia at lunch. They met at a cafe across the street, ordering salads. Sophia, in a bright yellow t-shirt, looked worried. Lindsay, this is bad, she said, stirring her salad. If he hired a detective, he won't back down. Why won't you take the test? Because I don't know whose baby it is, Lindsay admitted, lowering her voice. If it's not Atana's, he'll be gone. I can't risk that. But he already knows about Ryan and Caleb, Sophia said. Refusing the test will only make it worse. Maybe you should talk to him. Confess? So what? Lindsay snapped. He should file for divorce right now. I have to buy myself time. Okay, but be careful, Sophia said. He looks like a man who will go all the way. Lindsay nodded, but her heart was clenching. She walked back into the office, avoiding Ryan, who was trying to talk to her at the coffee machine. Hey, are you okay? He asked, holding up his mug. You look tense. It's okay, Lindsay snapped, walking back to her desk. She couldn't let him interfere. At home, Ethan was reserved. He cooked dinner beef tacos and ate in silence while Lindsay talked about work. She tried to be cheerful, but his coldness was intimidating. Are you still angry? She asked, pushing her plate away. About yesterday? I'm not angry, Ethan said, looking at her. I'm waiting for your decision on the test. That's all. Ethan, please, Lindsay said, her voice softening. Can we forget about this, for the sake of the baby? No, he said firmly. I can't live without knowing the truth. Test or nothing. Lindsay stood up and went into the bedroom, feeling like her world was crumbling. Ethan stayed at the table, deciding he would give her another day before calling her lawyer. As the months passed, tensions grew. Lindsay avoided Ryan and Caleb, but refused to take the test. Ethan, despite the pain, stayed in the house, preparing for the baby's birth. In March 2024, Lindsay gave birth to a daughter, Claire, at a hospital in Naperville. Ethan was there, holding her hand during the birth, but his face was cold. When the nurse, a young woman named Amy, handed Claire to him, he looked at the girl and said quietly, "She is beautiful." Really? Lindsay smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead. Do you want to hold her? Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant. He picked up Claire, but handed her back to the nurse a minute later. After the birth, he walked out into the hallway and called his lawyer, David Clark. David, this is Ethan, he said, his voice calm. The baby was born. I want to request a DNA test, a forensic one under Illinois law. Okay, said Clark, the man with the raspy voice. I'll get the paperwork ready. We can file a request through the courts and have the test done at a certified lab. It'll take a couple of days. Thank you, Ethan said. I want to make this official. He hung up and walked back into the room where Lindsay was holding Claire. She looked at him, but said nothing. Ethan sat down next to her, but there was a wall between them. He knew the test would change everything, but he was ready for the truth, whatever it was. At the hospital, they were visited by Linda, a neighbor who brought a bouquet of daisies. Oh, Lindsay, she's a sweetheart, Linda exclaimed, looking at Claire. What did you name her? Claire, Lindsay replied, smiling. Thank you for the flowers, Linda. Congratulations to you both. Linda said, hugging Ethan. Call me if you need anything. Bob's ready to build her a swing. Thank you, Ethan said, but his smile was strained. Linda walked away, not noticing the tension. Ethan looked at Lindsay and Claire with a mixture of love and pain. He wanted to believe that Claire was his, but Grayson's evidence was nagging. The DNA test was his last hope for clarity, and he wasn't going to back down. It was a cold morning in Naperville on March 14th, 2024, and Ethan Walsh sat in his pickup truck in a construction site parking lot, holding his phone. His dark hair was hidden under a baseball cap, and his eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night. A week ago, his wife Lindsay's daughter Claire was born, and Ethan had filed a subpoena for a DNA test to prove paternity. The lab had called him last night, and he was waiting for a courier with the official results. Ethan, a 32-year-old engineer, felt like his life was hanging by a thread. The evidence of Lindsay's infidelity's photos and texts with Ryan and Caleb had already broken his heart, but he hoped that Claire was his. The phone rang. Mr. Walsh, this is Dr. Lawson in the lab, said the woman on the other end. The results are ready. A courier will deliver them to you in an hour. You'll need to sign for them. Thanks, Ethan said, his voice hoarse. I'm at the construction site. Tell the courier to look for the blue pickup. He hung up and stared at the steering wheel. Lindsay was home with Claire, and Ethan hadn't told her about the call. Since their argument about the DNA test, he'd kept his distance, sleeping in the guest room. Lindsay tried to act normal, but her smiles seemed forced. Ethan knew that would change today. The courier, a young man in a green jacket, showed up an hour later, handing Ethan a sealed envelope. Sign here, he said, holding out a clipboard. Ethan signed and was left alone. He opened the envelope, pulled out a sheet of paper, and read, Probability of paternity, 0%. His fingers tightened around the paper. Claire was not his daughter. He sat there, staring at the words until they began to blur. Ethan shoved the envelope into the glove compartment and started the car. He decided to talk to his lawyer before heading home. In the office of the lawyer, David Clark, Ethan sat at his desk, still holding the results. Clark, a man in his 50s with gray hair at the temples, leafed through the documents. The results are clear, Clark said, adjusting his glasses. That gives you grounds for divorce on the grounds of adultery. In Illinois, we can file for irreconcilable differences, but evidence of adultery strengthens your case. What do you want? Divorce, Ethan said, his voice level. I can't stay with her after this, and I don't want any commitment to a child. She's not mine. Got it, Clark nodded. I'll get the paperwork done. The house is in your name because you bought it before the marriage, but Lindsay can claim some of the joint assets. Did you have a prenuptial agreement? Yes, Ethan replied. It says she doesn't get alimony if she cheats. I want it to be legal. Okay, Clark said, making notes. We'll file the paperwork next week. I'll notify Lindsay formally. Do you want me to tell her the test results? No, Ethan said. I'll tell you myself. He left the office feeling empty. Waiting for him at the construction site was Matt, a colleague who had been inspecting beams near the Dupage River. Hey, Walsh, where have you been? Matt asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. Frank called again, wants new plans for tomorrow. I'll get to it, Ethan said, heading toward the trailer. He tried to focus on his work, but thoughts of Lindsay and Claire kept coming back. Matt noticed his state. You okay, man? He asked, opening a bottle of water. You look like you got run over by a truck. Just family stuff, Ethan said, sitting down at his laptop. I'll get it sorted out soon. If anything happens, I'm here, Matt said, clapping him on the shoulder. I'll go check the supports. Ethan nodded, but his mind was at home. He decided he would talk to Lindsay that evening after work. He didn't want to fight, but he was prepared for her reaction. Lindsay, meanwhile, was at home, rocking Claire in her arms. The baby was asleep, wrapped in a pink blanket, and Lindsay looked at her with a mixture of love and fear. She knew Ethan had submitted a DNA test, and her refusal had only made things worse. She hoped she could convince him otherwise if the results came back against her. Lindsay put Claire in her crib and went into the kitchen, where she ran into Linda, their neighbor, who had come in with a pot of soup. "Lindsay, I brought chicken soup," Linda said, setting the pot on the table. Her glasses were fogged with steam. "For the new mom. How are you coping?" "Thank you, Linda," Lindsay smiled, though her voice was shaking. "We're still getting used to it. Claire sleeps a lot, but I'm exhausted." "Oh, that's okay," Linda said, sitting up. "When my son was born, I didn't sleep for a month. If anything happens, call me. I can babysit." "You're an angel," Lindsay said, pouring tea. They chatted about prams and local shops, and Lindsay felt a little better. But when Linda left, her anxiety returned. She texted Sophia, "Ethan is silent, but I know the test is coming. I'm scared." Sophia replied, "Hang in there. Maybe you should talk to him. Try to explain it all." Lindsay shook her head, putting her phone away. There was nothing to explain. She knew she was to blame. Ethan returned home at 7 o'clock, holding an envelope with the results. Lindsay was in the living room, feeding Claire a bottle. She looked at him, noticing his serious face. "Ethan, you're late," she said, trying to sound light. "Want me to heat up some soup?" Linda brought some. "Lindsay, sit down," Ethan said, placing the envelope on the table. "The test results are in." Lindsay froze, her hands shaking. "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan opened the envelope and showed her the paper. "Claire is not mine. 0% chance." Lindsay went pale, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, this is a mistake. They could have messed up. Let's do another test." "It's a certified lab," Ethan said, his voice cold. "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch with you." "Ethan, please." Lindsay stood up, still holding Claire. "We can survive this. I made a mistake, but Claire is our daughter. You were with her in the hospital. You held her." "She's not mine, Lindsay," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You've been lying to me this whole time. I've seen the pictures, the messages. You've been seeing Ryan and Caleb behind my back. I can't forgive that." "I love you," Lindsay said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can be a family. Claire needs you." "No," Ethan said. "You chose this when you started lying. I'm not staying." Lindsay collapsed on the couch, clutching Claire. "What do I do? Where do I go?" she whispered. "That's your problem," Ethan said, heading for the door. "I'll spend the night at my brother's. The lawyer will send you the papers." He left, leaving Lindsay in silence. She sat there, looking at Claire, who began to whine. Lindsay felt her world crumbling, but she couldn't blame Ethan. She knew her lies had caused this. The next day, Lindsay went to the office, leaving Claire with the nanny, Mrs. Campbell, an older woman from next door. Mrs. Campbell, with gray curls and a kind smile, took Claire in without question. "Such a sweet girl," she said, rocking Claire. "Don't worry, Lindsay, I can handle it. Go to work." "Thank you, Mrs. Campbell," Lindsay replied, her voice weak. "I'll be back at 6. She tried to keep her cool in the office. Melissa, the receptionist, noticed her red eyes. "Lindsay, are you okay?" she asked, holding a stack of papers. "You look like you haven't slept." "I'm just tired," Lindsay replied, sitting down at the table. "Claire's been whining all night." "Oh, I know that feeling," Melissa said. "My daughter didn't sleep for the first few months either. If anything happens, call me." Lindsay nodded, but her mind was on Ethan. She texted Sophia, telling her the test results. Sophia called right away. "Lindsay, this is terrible," she said, her voice full of sympathy. What will you do?" "I don't know," Lindsay admitted. "He wants a divorce. I tried to stop him, but he won't listen." "Maybe we should give him some time," Sophia suggested. "He's angry, but maybe he'll cool off." "I don't think so," Lindsay said. "He's so determined. I ruined everything." "Hang in there," said Sophia. If anything happens, I'll come. You're not alone. Lindsay thanked him and hung up. In late March 2024, in Naperville, Illinois, Lindsay Harper sat in her living room holding her 2-week-old baby Claire. Their home, a cozy cottage with a large backyard, now felt foreign to Lindsay. Ethan Walsh, her husband, had filed for divorce after a DNA test showed he was not Claire's father. Lindsay, a 33-year-old marketer, felt her life falling apart. Evidence from a detective of her infidelities with Ryan and Caleb and her refusal to take a DNA test had destroyed everything she had tried to hold on to. Today, she was waiting to see Ethan's lawyer to discuss the terms of the divorce. Lindsay tucked Claire into bed and checked her phone. A text from Sophia, her friend. "How are you? Call if you need support." Lindsay didn't answer. She was too exhausted. The doorbell rang, startling her. It was David Clark, Ethan's lawyer, a man in his 50s with gray hair and a sharp suit. "Mrs. Walsh," Clark said, entering with a briefcase. "I've brought divorce papers. Can we discuss them?" "Sure," Lindsay said, gesturing toward the couch. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and there were shadows under her eyes. "Have a seat. Would you like some water?" "No, thank you," Clark said, opening his briefcase. Ethan filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, as is customary in Illinois. Given the evidence of infidelity, he also relies on your prenuptial agreement. Lindsay clasped her hands. "What does this mean for me?" "Ethan keeps the house, since he bought it before the marriage," Clark said, handing her the papers. "The joint account is split evenly, which is about $5,000 for you. But because of the proven infidelity, you lose your right to child support. Ethan also waives any responsibility for the child, since DNA testing has proven he is not the father." Lindsay took the papers, her fingers shaking. "5,000, that's it. We were married for 3 years. "Those are the terms of the contract," Clark said, his voice neutral. "You can hire your own lawyer to contest it, but the evidence of adultery is strong. The court will likely side with Ethan." "He doesn't even want to talk to me," Lindsay said, her voice shaking. "I've tried, but he won't listen." "That's his right," Clark replied. "You have 10 days to sign the papers. Ethan asked me to tell you that you can stay in the house until the end of the month, but then you'll have to leave." Lindsay nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. "Thanks for explaining." Clark gathered his briefcase and left. Lindsay was left alone, looking at the papers. Claire began to whine, and Lindsay picked her up, trying to calm her down. She knew Ethan wouldn't change his mind, but the thought of losing her home and her future with him was unbearable. The next day, Lindsay drove to the marketing agency's office, leaving Claire with Mrs. Campbell, a neighbor who had agreed to babysit. Mrs. Campbell, an older woman with a kind smile, held Claire while Lindsay got ready. "Don't worry, dear," said Mrs. Campbell, smoothing her gray curls. "Claire and I will have a lovely time. I'll even sing her my old lullabies." "Thank you," Lindsay replied, pulling on her jacket. "I'll be back by 5. In the office, Lindsay tried to concentrate. Melissa, the receptionist, sorted through mail, and Josh, the intern, fiddled with the coffee machine. "Lindsay, you're back," Melissa exclaimed, her red hair bouncing. "How's the baby?" "It's growing," Lindsay smiled, sitting down at the table. "Mel, what's going on with the coffee shop?" "Ramirez wants to launch a campaign for Easter," Melissa said, handing over the folder. "I've made an appointment for you to meet him tomorrow." "Great," Lindsay nodded. She opened her laptop, but her mind was on the divorce. She texted Sophia, "Ethan filed for divorce. I'm losing everything." Sophia replied, "Come over to my place after work. Let's talk." Lindsay agreed, needing support. At lunchtime, she stopped at a cafe across the street where she met Carl, a street vendor selling hot dogs who was always happy to see her. "Lindsay, it's been a while," Carl said, preparing her order. His face was lined, but his eyes were shining. "How's the baby doing?" "It's fine," Lindsay replied, taking a hot dog. just a lot of stuff. Oh, I know, said Carl. My daughter didn't sleep either when her son was born. Hang in there, it'll get easier. Thanks, Carl, Lindsay smiled. She ate a hot dog on a park bench, thinking about how to explain her situation to Sophia. That evening, Lindsay arrived at Sophia's small apartment in downtown Naperville. Sophia, wearing a cozy sweater, opened the door and hugged her. Lindsay, you look exhausted, Sophia said, putting the kettle on. Tell me what happened. Ethan filed for divorce, Lindsay said, sitting down on the couch. The test showed that Claire is not his. I get $5,000 and have to move out of the house by the end of the month. 5,000. Sophia exclaimed, pouring tea. That's nothing. Are you going to dispute it? I don't know, Lindsay admitted, fiddling with her mug. We had a contract, and my cheating is ruining everything. I've tried to talk to him, but he won't talk. Oh my God, Lindsay, Sophia said, sitting down next to him. Why didn't you tell him sooner? Maybe he would have understood. He wouldn't understand, Lindsay said, her eyes filling with tears. I messed everything up, Sophie. Now I'm alone with Claire, and I have nowhere to go. You can stay with me, Sophia suggested. I don't have much space, but we'll manage. Thank you, but I don't want to bother you, Lindsay said. I need to find a better job. My hours at the agency have been cut because of maternity leave. Okay, but don't refuse help, said Sophia. You're not alone, okay? Lindsay nodded, feeling grateful. They finished their tea and Lindsay went home, taking Claire from Mrs. Campbell. The next day, Lindsay called her mother, Elaine, hoping for support. Elaine lived in Darien, a half-hour drive away, and Lindsay decided to visit her. Mom, I need to talk, Lindsay said into the phone. Can I come with Claire? Of course, dear, Elaine replied, her voice warm but cautious. Daddy's at work, so it'll be quiet. Lindsay arrived at her parents' house, carrying Claire in a carrier. The house was just like it had been when she was a child, a neat lawn, flower beds. Elaine, a woman with short gray hair, opened the door and hugged her. Oh, Claire is so big, Elaine said, peering into the carrier. Come on, I've made some coffee. They sat in the kitchen, and Lindsay told them about the divorce. Ethan filed the papers, she said, looking into her mug. I'm losing the house, only getting $5,000. He wants nothing to do with Claire. Elaine sighed, her face turning serious. Lindsay, I won't lie, your dad warned Ethan before the wedding. He knew you, loved attention, but we still love you. You can stay with us, but Dad will be strict. I know, Lindsay said, her voice breaking, but I can't live with his judgment. I have to deal with this on my own. Then start with work, Elaine said. I can babysit Claire if you're looking for something new. Thanks, Mom, Lindsay said, hugging her. She left feeling a little relieved, but the pressure wasn't going away. At the office, Lindsay met Mr. Ramirez, the owner of the coffee shop, who was in high spirits. Lindsay, your Instagram posts worked, he said, holding up his phone. Latte sales are up 10%. Good to hear, Lindsay smiled. Want to continue the promotion? Yeah, let's do it until the end of April, Ramirez said, and add something. Spring, flowers, or something like that. We will, Lindsay replied, writing. Work was a distraction, but the thought of having to move out in 2 weeks was nagging at her. At home, Lindsay began packing, sorting through clothes and baby gear. She found a box of photos from their wedding and paused, looking at Ethan smiling. She wanted to call him, but she knew he wouldn't answer. Instead, she texted Sophia. Thanks for the support, trying to hang in there. Lindsay went to bed with Claire close. She knew the next few weeks would be tough, but she was determined to find a way out. Ethan was gone, the house was lost, but she wasn't going to give up for Claire. It was a rainy April in Naperville in 2024, and Lindsay Harper sat in her Toyota Corolla, parked outside a 24-hour Walmart. Her daughter, Claire, 3 weeks old, was asleep in her car seat in the back seat. Lindsay, a 33-year-old former marketer, looked down at her hands gripping the steering wheel. Her dark hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled. Her divorce from Ethan Walsh, confirmed by an Illinois court, had left her with $5,000 and no home, which Ethan kept. Evidence of her affairs with Ryan and Caleb had ruined everything, and now she was alone, trying to survive for Claire. A week ago, Lindsay lost her job. Her agency had laid off staff due to budget cuts, and Lindsay, on maternity leave, was taking a hit. Her savings were dwindling. $5,000 from Ethan had gone toward motel fees, diapers, and food for Claire. She'd sold her gold earrings to a pawn shop for $200 to buy another week at the motel, but the money was gone, and her car was her home. Lindsay pulled out her phone and texted Sophia, her friend, "Can I come over? I have nowhere to stay." Sophia responded an hour later, "Lindsay, I'm sorry, but I can't. You lied to Ethan, to me, to everyone. It's not fair. I need time." Lindsay reread the text, her eyes filling with tears. Sophia, who knew about her connections to Ryan and Caleb, no longer wanted to be a part of her life. Lindsay deleted the messages and put her phone away. She decided to call her parents, who lived in Darien, a half-hour away. Lindsay started the car and drove off, one hand on Claire's car seat. Her parents' house was the same as always, neat lawn, white picket fence. Elaine, her mother, answered the door, her gray hair pulled back into a bun. "Lindsay," Elaine said, looking at Claire. "Come in. What happened?" "Mom, I need help," Lindsay said, her voice shaking. "Ethan filed for divorce. I lost my job and I have nowhere to live." Elaine sighed, letting her in. "Come on, I'll make some tea. Dad's home, but he's not in the mood." They sat in the kitchen, which smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Lindsay told them about the divorce, about the DNA test that showed Ethan was not Claire's father. Elaine listened, shaking her head. "Lindsay, how did you come to this?" she asked, setting the mug down in front of her daughter. "Your dad and I warned you that things like this have consequences." "I know," Lindsay said, looking at Claire, asleep in the carrier. "But I need help, at least for a couple of days." "You can stay a week," Elaine said. "But Dad's not happy. He thinks you've brought shame on the family." Lindsay's father, Richard, a tall man with a stern face, walked in. He looked at Lindsay but avoided Claire. "You're here," he said, sitting down at the table. "Elaine said you were in trouble." "Yes, Dad," Lindsay answered, her voice quiet. "Ethan filed for divorce. I lost my job. I need a place to recover." Richard chuckled, picking up his coffee. "You did this to yourself, Lindsay. I told Ethan before the wedding that you couldn't be faithful. He didn't listen. And now what? You've come running to us?" "Dad, please," Lindsay said, her eyes watering. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I need help for Claire." "A week," Richard said, his voice firm. "Then you're leaving. It's a shame, Lindsay. I don't want the neighbors talking." Lindsay nodded, holding back tears. Elaine squeezed her hand, but said nothing. Lindsay spent a week in the old nursery, trying to stay out of her father's sight. She fed Claire, changed diapers, and looked for work on an old laptop, but all the jobs required experience, which she didn't have, or full-time work, which was impossible with a baby. On the seventh day, Richard knocked on her door. "Lindsay, it's time," he said, standing in the doorway. "You have to go. We can't keep you forever." "Dad, I have nowhere to go," Lindsay said, tucking Claire into bed. "Give me a few more days." "No," Richard snapped. "You made a choice when you lied to Ethan. Now figure it out." Lindsay packed up her things, a couple of bags of clothes and baby gear, and left. She stayed at a motel on the outskirts of Naperville, but after 2 days, she ran out of money and began sleeping in her car, parking at Walmart, where she wouldn't be bothered by security. Lindsay sold her engagement ring to a pawn shop for $150 to buy diapers and formula. Her own food was limited to cheap sandwiches from the supermarket. Lindsay texted Ryan, "We need to talk. This is important." He responded a day later, "I'm married, Lindsay. Don't text me anymore." She was shocked Ryan had never mentioned his wife. Lindsay tried to contact Caleb, but he blocked her number. She sat in the car, looking at Claire sleeping, and felt the loneliness pressing in on her. One day, Lindsay stopped by the diner next to Walmart to get coffee. Rita, a waitress she knew from her days with Ethan, was working there. Rita, a woman with a warm smile and blonde hair, noticed her. "Lindsay, is that you?" Rita said, setting her coffee on the counter. "Long time no see. How's the baby doing?" "It's fine," Lindsay replied, trying to smile. "It's just a lot." "Oh, I know how it is," Rita said, wiping down the counter. "My son always kept me on my feet. Where are you now? Ethan said you lived in a beautiful house." "We broke up," Lindsay admitted, her voice shaking. "I'm still looking for a place." Rita frowned, but didn't ask any questions. "If anything, come in. I'm always here. I'll buy you some coffee." "Thanks, Rita," Lindsay said, leaving $1 for the coffee. She left feeling a little less alone, but reality quickly returned. That evening, Lindsay sat in the car, feeding Claire. She opened her laptop, using Walmart's Wi-Fi, and searched for programs to help single mothers. All required documents she didn't have or had long waiting lists. She texted Sophia again. "Sorry about everything. I need help." But Sophia didn't respond. Lindsay knew their friendship was over. The next day, Lindsay stopped by the library to print out her resume. There she met Monica, the librarian, a woman in her 40s with short black hair. "Lindsay, have you been looking for a job?" Monica asked, noticing her at the printer. "We have a bulletin board here. You can take a look." "Thank you," Lindsay said, holding Claire. "I'm trying to find something. It's not easy with a baby." "I understand," said Monica. "My sister raised a daughter alone, too. Try the local cafes. They often hire part-time workers." "I'll try," Lindsay nodded. She printed out the resume and left, leaving one on the bulletin board. That night, Lindsay parked outside the supermarket, checking her balance $30. She bought diapers and a candy bar, deciding that food was more important to Claire. Claire started to whine, and Lindsay sang her the lullaby she had sung her mother. She looked at her daughter, feeling a mixture of love and despair. Her life had changed in a matter of weeks, from a cozy home to a car, from friends to loneliness. Lindsay tried not to think about the past, but the memories of her wedding with Ethan, of his smile, of the way he held her hand, kept coming back. She knew it was her fault, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Lindsay looked at Claire, asleep in her car seat, and promised herself that she would find a way for her. But for now, she was alone, with an empty wallet and no hope of help from anyone who had once been there. It was a damp May day in Naperville in 2024, and Lindsay Harper sat in her Toyota Corolla, parked outside a 24-hour Walmart. Her 3-month-old daughter, Claire, was asleep in a car seat in the back seat, wrapped in a thin blanket. Lindsay, a 33-year-old former marketer, looked exhausted, her dark hair pulled back into a messy bun, her clothes smelling of sweat. Her divorce from Ethan Walsh, the loss of her job, and alienation from friends and family had left her homeless and penniless. She'd been living out of her car for 2 weeks, spending the last of her money on diapers and formula for Claire. That morning, Lindsay had sold her last pair of earrings at a pawn shop for $50 to buy food, but it had only lasted a few days. Lindsay looked at Claire, who was snoring peacefully, and felt a lump in her throat. She opened her wallet and found $12 left. She needed to find a way out, but all her job applications were being rejected, and the assistance programs required documents she didn't have. Lindsay started the car and drove to Rita's, where she often sat with 1 cup of coffee to use the Wi-Fi and charge her phone. The diner was nearly empty except for 2 truckers behind the counter. Rita, a 50-something waitress with a warm smile and blonde hair, spotted Lindsay walking in with Claire in a carrier. "Lindsay, honey, you're back," Rita said, setting the coffee pot on the counter. "How's your baby? Would you like some regular coffee?" "Yes, please," Lindsay replied, setting the carrier down on a chair nearby. "Claire is fine, she's just not sleeping much." "Oh, I know how it is," Rita said, pouring coffee. My son, when he was her age, screamed all night long. How are you holding up? I try, Lindsay said, her voice weak. She pulled out her phone to check her email, but there were no new messages. Rita looked at her, frowning. You look exhausted, she said, sitting down across from him. Is something wrong? Are you in the house with Ethan? Lindsay hesitated, fiddling with her napkin. She didn't want to tell him, but exhaustion and loneliness had gotten the better of her. We got divorced, she admitted. I lost my job, and I don't have a place to live. Claire and I sleep in the car. Rita gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, Lindsay, in the car? With a baby? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't mean to burden anyone, Lindsay replied, her eyes growing moist. I thought I could handle it, but it's only gotten worse. Rita stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked at Lindsay. Listen, I have a spare room at home. It's not a palace, but there's a bed in there, and you won't have to sleep in the car. You can stay with me until you get back on your feet. Lindsay stared at her, disbelieving. Rita, are you serious? Why are you helping me? We barely know each other. Because I was in your place, Rita said, her voice softening. When my son was born, I was alone, without a job, without money. One woman gave me a chance, and I'm still grateful. Now it's my turn. Lindsay nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Just come, Rita said, writing the address on a napkin. I'll be off work in an hour. Meet me at my place. Lindsay picked up Claire and the coffee, leaving Rita her last $2 tip. She drove to the address Rita had given her, a modest house on the outskirts of Naperville with peeling paint and a small garden. Rita was already waiting at the door, still wearing her apron. Come in, she said, opening the door. The room is at the end of the hall. There's a bed and a chest of drawers. There's no crib for Claire, but I'll find something. Lindsay walked in, holding Claire. The room was small, with faded wallpaper and an old mattress, but for Lindsay, it was a blessing. Rita, this is more than I could ask for, she said, setting the carrier down on the floor. Don't start, Rita waved her off. Come on, I'll show you the kitchen. I have some soup, I can heat it up. They sat down at the kitchen table, which smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Rita placed a bowl of vegetable soup in front of Lindsay. Eat, she said, and tell me what happened. No details if you don't want to, but I can see you're having a hard time. Lindsay gave a quick account. The divorce, the DNA test, the job loss. She didn't mention Ryan and Caleb, but Rita didn't ask. God, girl, you've been through hell, she said, shaking her head. But you're young, you can handle it. You just have to start over. I don't know where to start, Lindsay admitted as she fed Claire. I have no money, no job, nothing. The first thing is housing, Rita said. I know about the SNAP program for single mothers. It helps with food. And there's subsidized housing. I can help you apply for it. I have a friend, Nancy, who works in social services. She knows how it works. You're too kind, Lindsay said, her voice breaking. I don't deserve this. Enough, Rita said firmly. You're a mother, you have a child. That's all that matters. Tomorrow we'll sit down and sort out the paperwork. The next day, Rita took the day off and drove Lindsay to the social services office in downtown Naperville. Nancy, a woman with short black hair and a formal blouse, met them at the desk. Rita, are you saving someone again? Nancy smiled, looking at Lindsay. Is that your friend? Yeah, Lindsay, Rita said. She needs help with SNAP and housing. Can you give me some ideas on where to start? Sure, Nancy said, pulling out the forms. Lindsay, I'll need your ID, Claire's birth certificate, and proof of income, even if you don't have any. SNAP is quick, housing takes longer, but I'll help. Lindsay handed over the documents she had kept in her bag. Thanks, Nancy, she said. I didn't even know programs like this existed. A lot of people don't know, Nancy said, filling out the form. SNAP will give you a food card, about $200 a month. Housing might take a couple months, but I'll make you a priority. Rita sat next to her, holding Claire, while Lindsay filled out the forms. See, that's something, Rita said. Baby steps, Lindsay. After the office, they stopped at the supermarket where Lindsay bought formula and bread with the last of her money. In line, they met Tom, a truck driver who often ate at Rita's. Rita, are you not wearing an apron today? Tom winked, his beard moving as he spoke. Who is this little girl? This is Claire, Lindsay's daughter, Rita replied, pointing at Claire. We're here on business. She's cute, Tom said, looking at Claire. Lindsay, if you need a part-time job, the diner is always looking for people. Ask Rita. Really? Lindsay looked at Rita. You're hiring. Sometimes, Rita answered. I'll talk to the boss, Joe. He likes me, maybe he'll agree. Lindsay nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. They returned to Rita's house, where Lindsay put Claire to bed. Rita got out an old box she used as her son's crib and set it up in Lindsay's room. It's not perfect, but it's better than a carrier, Rita said, adjusting the blanket. Come on, get some rest. Lindsay sat on the bed, looking at Claire. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone. Rita, I can't thank you enough, she said. You literally saved us. Stop thanking me, Rita waved her off. Just hang in there. You're stronger than you think. The next day, Lindsay went with Rita to the diner to talk to Joe, the owner. Joe, a stocky man with a bald head, listened to Rita. We need another waitress for the morning shift, he said, looking at Lindsay. You'll pay $10 an hour plus tips, but it'll be tough with a kid. I can come when Claire is asleep, Lindsay said. Rita can help keep an eye on her. Okay, let's try it, Joe said. You start on Monday. Don't be late. Lindsay thanked her and left, feeling relieved. That evening, she filled out several more job applications using Rita's laptop. She also called her mother, Elaine, to update her on her progress. Mom, I found a place to stay, Lindsay said, holding up the phone. And maybe a job. It's small, but it's a start. I'm glad, dear, Elaine replied. Daddy's still angry, but I'll talk to him. Bring Claire this weekend. I want to see her. Thanks, Mom, Lindsay said, her voice softening. She hung up, feeling like she had a chance for the first time in a long time. Rita, sitting at the table, I was leafing through a magazine. See, things are getting better, she said. Little steps, Lindsay. Lindsay nodded, looking at Claire. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but Rita's kindness and the first steps toward stability gave her hope. She slept in a real bed for the first time in weeks and promised herself not to give up for her daughter. It was a hot July in Naperville in 2024, and Lindsay Harper stood in a small one-bedroom apartment in Aurora, Illinois, holding her 4-month-old daughter, Claire. The apartment, a subsidized housing program, was modest. The linoleum was worn. The wallpaper was old, but it was clean and safe. Lindsay, a 33-year-old former marketer, felt relieved for the first time in months. After divorcing Ethan Walsh, losing her job, and living out of her car, she had turned over a new leaf with the help of Marge, a waitress who had taken her in and helped her apply for SNAP. Lindsay now worked at Marge's and was attending free counseling to help her understand her mistakes. Lindsay set Claire's carrier down on the floor and looked around the apartment. There was barely any furniture, just a mattress Marge had given her and a plastic dresser from the thrift store. She pulled out her phone and texted Marge, "Got the keys? It's not a palace, but it's our home. Thanks for everything." Marge replied, "Good job. Come on in and let's celebrate." Lindsay smiled, feeling grateful. She put Claire in the carrier and drove to Rita's, where she worked part-time. The cafe was bustling with truckers sitting at the counter and local students drinking coffee at tables. Marge, in her trademark apron, poured coffee with her blonde hair escaping from her ponytail. "Lindsay, you're glowing," Marge exclaimed, noticing her. "How's the apartment? Show me the pictures." "Here," Lindsay said, showing the pictures on her phone. It's kind of empty, but I already found a couch on sale. I'll pick it up tomorrow. Great, Marge said, setting coffee in front of Lindsay. Joe said you can take more shifts if you want. He's pleased with you. Really? Lindsay perked up. That would be great. Diapers aren't cheap. Yeah, Marge nodded. I'll talk to him. In the meantime, take the pie, my gift. Lindsay grabbed a piece of apple pie and sat at the counter, feeding Claire her bottle. Tom, the truck driver who often chatted with Marge, walked in, his beard moving as he ordered a burger. Lindsay, are you a waitress now? Tom asked, sitting down next to her. You look good. Is that your baby? Yes, Claire, Lindsay replied, smiling. I'm here on a part-time job. Where are you going? Iowa, Tom said, taking a bite of his burger. A load of fries. If you're ever in my area, give me a call and I'll buy you a beer. Thanks, Lindsay laughed. But I'm busy with this little one right now. Tom left and Lindsay began her shift delivering orders. Her boss, Joe, a bald man with a good-natured smile, checked the register. Lindsay, you're a quick study, he said, counting the take. Want to take the morning shift? Pay $10 an hour, plus tips. That would be great, Lindsay replied. Can I bring Claire if she doesn't bother me? Okay, Joe said. Just keep it in the back room if it gets noisy. Lindsay nodded, feeling like her life was starting to improve. After her shift, she drove to the social services office to get her SNAP paperwork approved. Nancy, the worker who had helped her earlier, was behind the counter. Lindsay, how's the new apartment? Nancy asked, her black hair pulled back into a neat bun. Everything okay? Yes, thank you, Lindsay replied, handing over the papers. But there's not much furniture. Where can I find something inexpensive? Try the Main Street thrift store, Nancy said. They have beds and tables for pennies. And come by if you need anything for SNAP, I'll help. Thank you, Nancy, Lindsay said, taking Claire. She felt that Nancy and Marge's support gave her the strength to move on. That evening, Lindsay went to her first appointment with a psychologist through a local charity program. The office was in an old building in downtown Aurora, and Lindsay walked in with Claire nervous. The psychologist, Dr. Laura Miller, a woman in her 40s with a warm smile, greeted her in the office. Lindsay, it's good to see you, Laura said, pointing to the sofa. Tell me what brings you here. Lindsay placed Claire in the carrier and sat up. I screwed up my life, she began, her voice shaking. Divorce, losing my job, living in my car. Now I'm trying to start over, but I don't know how. It's a big step that you're here, Laura said, taking notes. Tell me about yourself. How are you feeling? Lindsay talked about her divorce, her infidelity to Ethan, and her search for attention from other men. I always wanted to be the center, she admitted. Ryan, Caleb, they gave me that. But I lost it all because of my mistakes. Why did you seek this attention? Laura asked, her voice calm. What did it give you? I don't know, Lindsay said, looking at Claire. Maybe I didn't think I was good enough. Ethan was perfect, but I wanted more. That's a good start, Laura said. Let's try to figure out what drives you. That will help you figure out how to move forward. Lindsay nodded, relieved to have someone listening without judgment. They agreed to meet once a week, and Lindsay left feeling like she had taken the first step toward change. The next day, Lindsay stopped by the thrift store warehouse Nancy had recommended. There, she met a volunteer, John, an older man with a thick beard, who was helping load furniture. Looking for something specific, John asked, gesturing toward the rows of tables and chairs. We've got a lot of stuff here. I need a table and maybe a couple of chairs, Lindsay said, holding Claire. Something inexpensive. Here, look, John said, pointing to a wooden table for $20. It's solid, just a scratch on the side. The chairs are $5, take your pick. Lindsay chose a table and 2 chairs, spending $30 from her SNAP budget. John helped load the furniture into her car, and Lindsay thanked him. At home, she arranged the furniture, hung the curtains Marge had given her, and placed a photograph of Claire on the table. The apartment began to look like a home. Lindsay fed Claire and lay down on the mattress, feeling like she had a place to call her own for the first time in months. That evening, Marge dropped by with a pizza. "How do you like it?" she asked, looking around the apartment. "It's cozy already." "Thanks to you," Lindsay said, cutting into the pizza. "I couldn't have done it without you, Marge." "Enough," Marge waved her hand, sitting down. "Tell me, how was the consultation with the psychologist?" "Okay," Lindsay replied. "She makes me think about why I did what I did. It's hard, but necessary." "You're doing great," Marge said, taking a bite of pizza. "Just don't give up. You've got Claire, and you're on the right track now." Lindsay nodded, looking at her daughter. She knew there was still a lot of work ahead, but the apartment, the part-time job, and Marge's support gave her strength. It was a hot July 2025 in Aurora, Illinois, and Lindsay Harper was pushing Claire in a stroller down the sidewalk downtown. Her daughter was a year and a half old, and she was happily swinging her legs while holding a plastic toy. Lindsay, a 34-year-old single mother, looked better than she had a year ago. Her dark hair was neatly styled, and her jeans and t-shirt were clean, albeit thrift store-bought. After divorcing Ethan Walsh, losing her job, and living out of her car, Lindsay had found her footing with Marge, a waitress who had helped her get subsidized housing and a part-time job at a coffee shop. Now Lindsay lived modestly in a small apartment, waitressing and attending free counseling to sort out her mistakes. Lindsay pulled up outside Rita's, where she worked 5 days a week. She parked the stroller outside and walked in, holding Claire. The place was bustling with students using laptops and truckers chatting at the counter. Marge, her blonde hair in a ponytail, was pouring coffee. "Lindsay, Claire," Marge exclaimed, noticing them. "You're not working today. What's the surprise?" "I thought I'd stop by," Lindsay smiled, sitting Claire down in a chair. Claire wanted to see Aunt Marge. "Oh, how clever," Marge said, handing Claire a cookie. "Want some juice, baby?" "Yes," Claire squealed, clapping her hands. Lindsay laughed, ordering herself a coffee. "How are you?" Marge asked, setting the mug in front of Lindsay. "You look better." "I'm trying," Lindsay said, sipping her coffee. Claire started saying new words. She said "mama" yesterday, and I almost cried. "That's so sweet," Marge said. "Joe's thinking of giving you more shifts. Can you handle it?" "That would be great," Lindsay nodded. "The extra money wouldn't hurt. Diapers are getting more expensive again." Tom, a truck driver who often visited Rita, walked into the cafe. His beard moved as he ordered a burger. "Lindsay, you're getting prettier," he winked, sitting down next to her. "Is Claire running yet?" "Almost," Lindsay said, adjusting Claire. "She's trying, but she's falling." "My son was always running when he was her age," Tom said, taking a bite of his burger. "If you need a stronger stroller, I have an old one in the garage. Take it." "Thank you, Tom," Lindsay smiled. "I'll think about it." After coffee, Lindsay went into downtown Aurora to buy groceries on her SNAP card. At the supermarket, she ran into Kate, a former classmate who was working as a cashier. "Lindsay, how are you?" Kate asked, her blonde hair bouncing as she scanned the products. "Claire's so big." "Yeah, he's growing fast," Lindsay replied, putting the diapers in the basket. "How's your son?" "Oh, he's already in kindergarten," Kate said. "If you need kindergarten for Claire, I know an inexpensive one. Should I give you the number?" "That would be great," Lindsay replied. "Thanks, Kate." They chatted about old acquaintances, and Lindsay left with the number of the daycare. Outside, she spotted a familiar figure across the street, Ethan, her ex-husband, sitting in a cafe with a young woman. They were laughing, and Lindsay felt a stab of pain. Her first impulse was to go over, to say something to get his attention, but she stopped herself. A year of therapy had taught her to recognize her old habits, attention-seeking manipulation. She took a deep breath, turned the stroller around, and walked the other way. At home, in her small apartment, Lindsay put Claire down for her nap. The apartment was modest but cozy, a table and chairs from a charity warehouse, curtains from Marge, a few of Claire's toys on the floor. Lindsay sat down at the table and opened her laptop. She decided to write Ethan a letter not to get him back, but to apologize. "Dear Ethan," she began, typing. "I know you don't want to see me, and I understand that. I made terrible mistakes. I lied to you, I cheated on you, and I lost everything because of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. But I want to say that I'm sorry. You were a good husband, and I didn't appreciate that. I'm working on being a better person for Claire. I wish you happiness, Lindsay." She reread the letter, printed it out on an old printer, and mailed it to Ethan's address, which she knew. Lindsay didn't expect a response, but writing the letter gave her a sense of relief. She closed her laptop and went to check on Claire, who was asleep, clutching her teddy bear. That evening, Lindsay went to see a psychologist, Dr. Laura Miller. Laura's office was in downtown Aurora, and Lindsay left Claire with Marge, who had volunteered to babysit. "Lindsay, how's your week been?" Laura asked, her warm smile reassuring. She sat in her chair, holding a notepad. "Not bad," Lindsay replied, sitting down on the couch. "I saw Ethan today, with a girl. I wanted to come over, but I didn't." "That's a big step," Laura said, taking notes. "What stopped you?" "I realized that was the old me," Lindsay said. "The one who wanted attention. I don't want to be like that. For Claire's sake." "You're growing up," Laura nodded. "Tell me what you feel when you think about the past." "Shame," Lindsay admitted. "I destroyed my marriage because I was looking for something I already had. I didn't value Ethan. Now I'm learning to value what I have: Claire, my job, Marge." "This is important progress," Laura said. "What do you want next for yourself?" "Be a good mom," Lindsay replied, "and someone you can trust. I'm tired of the lies." They talked for an hour, and Lindsay left feeling lighter. She picked up Claire from Marge, who was baking cookies in her kitchen. "Claire was an angel," Marge said, handing Lindsay a box of cookies. "How was your meeting?" "Okay," Lindsay said. "I'm starting to understand myself. It's weird, but it helps." "You're doing great," Marge said, hugging her. "Come on, let's have some cookies. Claire's already had some." Lindsay laughed as she sat down at the table. She felt like Marge had become her family, and it warmed her heart. A few days later, Lindsay received a call from her mother, Elaine. "Lindsay, I want to come over," Elaine said, "to see Claire. Dad's not ready yet, but I miss you." "Come on over, Mom," Lindsay replied, her voice softening. "Claire will be happy." Elaine arrived on Saturday, bringing a homemade cake. She sat on the floor with Claire, playing with blocks, while Lindsay made tea. "She's so much like you were at that age," Elaine said, looking at Claire. "I remember how you loved to build towers." "Yeah," Lindsay smiled, setting the mugs on the table. "Thanks for coming, Mom. It means a lot." "I want to be there," Elaine said. "Daddy's still mad, but he'll get over it. Give him time." Lindsay nodded, feeling warmth from her mother's words. They had spent the day together, and when Elaine left, Lindsay felt her connection with her family begin to heal. In that night, after Claire had fallen asleep, Lindsay sat in her apartment, looking at her toys and modest furniture. She thought about how far she had come in a year, from living in a car to having her own home, from being alone to having the support of Marge and her mother. She knew that her mistakes cheating on Ethan, lying, had led to the loss of everything, but now she was working on herself. Lindsay opened the journal Laura had started and wrote, "I'm not perfect, but I'm learning. I'll be better for Claire." She went to bed feeling that despite the difficulties, there was hope. Claire was her reason to move forward, and Lindsay was determined to be a mother and a person her daughter could be proud of. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.